It's Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs. Let's start the show with Lewis Tennant. Here we go. Guests and interviews that you're looking for with creators, innovators, and so much more. For all episodes and further info, verbalhighs.com is the place to go.
Alrighty, welcome to Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs, a podcast podcasted from Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, New Zealand. My name is Lewis, and I am the host of the show. If you are new here, that's news to you. This show has been going since late 2016, so technically kind of started 2017, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. We're in our 7th year and our 136th episode. They now drop roughly around the beginning of each month. Today, as I speak, is the 4th of July 2023, but ideally these podcast eps are evergreen. But like my guest, I don't know how that's nothing to do with my guest. Sorry, Matt. My guest today is my guest on the show, because it's evergreen, so you don't say today, because podcasts don't have time like radio. This is going really well. My guest on this episode, 136, is Matt Burgess, who is let's face it, a renowned UK London-based chef, originally from Wellington. That's my connection to him. I met him in 1998, as we discover in this... No, 1997, as we discover in this podcast episode. He left for London town a short time later. We talk about how that happened. It's got something to do with an instant Kiwi ticket. We talk bin chicken culture shock in Australia. For those who know the fabulous flora and fauna of Australia and the esteemed bin chicken. There's actually, I think there's a good bin chicken tune on YouTube. We talk... Matt's coming back briefly to New Zealand during lockdown madness. There's quite an extraordinary family story around that as well. No spoilers. Kitchen, hospitality and business culture, of course, things like that. This is work with Gordon Ramsay. There's Gordon Ramsay stories. There's Jamie Oliver stories. Him and Jamie are they're mates now. It was interesting. They're only about a year apart. Jamie's a year younger, made me realise. I mean, not that Matt hasn't fit a lot in. Not a lot of us haven't fit a lot into our years, but Jamie Oliver's fit a lot into his years. And since they are mates, Jamie, if listening, big fan. Really like Jules's beef stew. That's not a euphemism. It's a recipe in one of your cookbooks that I often come back to, although it's very hard to find Jerusalem artichokes in New Zealand. We talk inventing the urban hangi trademark. That's Matt who did that, not me. Probably the buzziest story of all. Buzzy is a Kiwiism for the people in the UK will hopefully inevitably listen. Buzzy bro, not to be confused with the buzzy bee. Buzzy is probably the buzziest story, bro, is in the last 20 minutes of what is the second to, I think from memory, the second to longest chat I've ever had on Verbal Highs, both of which coincidentally happen to be chefs. Maybe that's a vocation I'm particularly interested in. I'm not sure. Maybe they're great raconteurs. I find them generally very honest, open and passionate people, as Matt is and as Martin Bosley was. I turned the Bosley chat into 2 episodes because it ran nearly 3 hours. This one with Matt, I was thinking about doing the same, but it's come in just under 2 hours, so it's a long one. Who listens to 2 hour bloody chats, you might say? Well, I'd say $100 million Spotify deal with a certain American mixed martial arts commentators. People listen to 4 hour chats, so it's only half that length, isn't it? We missed his Hard House career in London, which I learned about via. This is Matt's, not Rogan's. I learned about via another podcast, interesting podcast chat Matt was on, and his extraordinary dalliance with crack, which he was quite open about. Big ups, because the family story involves Matt's mother passing, which I'll let him tell rather than me, obviously. But one thing I didn't say to Matt in the conversation is I assume, because that was in Wellington in New Zealand, that the hospice he speaks of is the Mary Potter Hospice, and just over a year ago, my grandmother, who was very close to, died, and I finally, after 7 years on the planet, realised what a hospice actually was and how essential they are and how incredible all the people who work in them are. So, yeah, big up the Mary Potter Hospice in Wellington. Good for the crack, this one. C-R-A-I-C, as the Irish say. I do like someone I can chat with who dips in and out of topics and subtopics and so on, like I do. I've met other people in my life who can't handle it. They say, stop, no, hang on, stay on topic. You're not listening to me. I have 2 exes who have said to me, generally, you know, the latter arguments in a relationship, you don't listen. Well, how come I remember that? How do we end up here? All right, enjoy this conversation. Obviously, there's a foodie. He's based in London, so I do enjoy when I refer to the Piccadilly line in London as the Piccalilli line, which of course is a delicious, overly sweet New Zealand condiment. Actually, it might be British as well with a name like Piccalilli. My audio students, if you're listening, don't take this as an exemplar of audio recording. After everything I've told you, Matt was on a laptop mic, so it's got a bit of that uncanny valley kind of Zoom sound. I tried to rescue it as much as I could. Not a critique, Matt, because I know you'll listen to this, but you know it's like when you send a plate out. I've got to explain, you know, what's going on with the plate. All right, take it away, Matt. Oh, no, don't. By the way, listen, verbalhighs.com. All the episodes are there. Some of my other projects are there. Verbal Highs podcast on Facebook, Verbal Highs on Twitter, Verbal Highs on Instagram, like, follow, share, all of that sort of modern currency that you can't trade for anything, can you, really? Kind of like magic beans. Throw me some magic beans.
Verbal Highs, real heart, real soul and no lies. Just verbally wise guys flying by.
Been a minute.
Sure, it comes in. It's been a little bit too long, Lewis.
Yeah. How are you anyway? I was just thinking you're probably coming into that 3 weeks that London has summer, right?
It's just coming to the back end of it. Now, I just found out this evening is that in 2 weeks' time, it's supposed to hit 40 degrees for about 11 days, which London will melt down. It will go into, the tubes will stop, there will be strikes, there's going to be panic. It's basically going to be a zombie apocalypse.
Yeah, because what's the one where you go, I haven't been there for over 20 years, but that tube line where you just, the really long escalator, it used to be hot down there even in winter. Is it Piccalilli?
Yeah.
Is it Piccalilli? What's the one that goes really deep under the ground?
Yeah, so that's Northern Line, basically.
Yeah.
That is the deepest one. That is probably the hottest one. However, the one that I live on is called the Central Line, which it is probably like a sauna. It's the most disgusting of the tube lines. It's horrible. It's smelly. Everyone is angry. I don't know if you can remember when you were here, but generally everyone is angry, but they're really, really angry when it's really hot. And they really get annoyed at a really happy-go-lucky Kiwi guy who's consistently positive, smiling at everyone as they're just angry with their
You're like
lives.
Crocodile Dundee, even though you've been there over 20 years.
Absolutely. Wearing the colours with pride. You must remember this one, guys.
Yeah, I was going to say, it looks like you dressed for a Wellington Day. Got your Soul Mine T-shirt on.
Got the Soul Mine T-shirt on. I got the Pounamu out.
Nice.
It was really funny, actually. I was at a festival last week, and I was having a chat to a guy who was like explaining to me how he lived in Wellington for a year and lived in a little place, have I ever heard of it, called Kilburnie?
Yeah.
And then I told him to look at my T-shirt, and he's like, oh my God. And I was like, yeah, you wouldn't have known Soul Mine. There's only a particular age group of people that know Tony, and
for me, that wasn't being some cool music guy. That was being a kid, and just because I happened to have a house in Lyle Bay where I grew up. So just happened that the local record shop happened to be, really well regarded. And Tony actually sold me a bunch of stuff that I never would have listened to otherwise. Like selling me that Soul to Soul album when I was like 12. That's quite cool. That's quite cool music to pass on to a 12-year-old, right? Rather than a Def Leppard tape or whatever.
I was the only part Maori young man in the whole of Miramar who basically thought he was a gangster because of NWA, and that all women were terrible. I'm not going to say that word.
Yeah.
And, and we were the most hardcore guys in Miramar, 44 for life.
Did you grow up in Miramar?
Oh, sorry, number 2. Yeah, well, I grew up on the border.
How did we never cross paths before, like, sort of Central City days and formative years? That's crazy. What school did you go to?
I went to Rongotai. I went to Strathmore Park School first.
Yeah.
I went to Seatoon Kindy. That was like the very beginning. Then Evans Bay Intermediate, and then on to Rongotai.
Oh my God, we were probably at Evans Bay. Oh no, you're a bit older than me, eh?
Yes, I'm turned 50 this year. You were like one year younger?
Oh, I'm going to turn 47 in November.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So definitely we would have been
much younger, Matt. Much younger.
Yeah. Thanks, bro. Thanks.
Actually, I realised back then that is a lot younger, because a few years makes all the difference when you're a little kid or a young teenager, you know?
Yeah, those were the greatest years. It's ever since I suppose over the last 9 years, I've given up smoking and drinking. Things are starting to come back now. Memories are starting to come back now that I can go, oh, yeah, that's right. I used to do that. Oh, I was a bit of a bad boy at Evans Bay Intermediate. I was expelled from Rongotai. That was for smoking weed. I'll never forget that, and getting the biggest slap on the hand.
And you're sort of saying like juvenile delinquency, but you were, the way you tell it, nearly a gang prospect. That blew my mind when I learned that.
Yeah. So when I was at Strathmore Park School, my best friend there was a guy called Danny, whose family were involved in the Black Power, and most of the guys that I hung out with in Newtown were all either Samoans or prospects, and Strathmore was just up the hill. So I grew up with all of the children of all the gang members, So as I grew into it, as I grew up from 11, 12, we started to understand like what these guys were doing, and I was like, wow, this was one of the most beautiful things that I could have, really gotten into. But it was lucky I had some really good friends that actually said,
"You think you're gonna
do not do it?
You think you're gonna live that NWA album?" But I was thinking about that, like, bro, the saddest thing about that, if you'd done it, is like how limiting compared to your life now. Like, my guess would be it would be a combo of jail, not in jail, jail, not in jail, and probably not having even held a passport.
I was lucky enough to speak to Danny. He has been in and out of prison all of his life, and he was out on remand, and a very good friend of mine that I went to Rongotai with actually went to go see him and messenger me and said, look, hey, I've got him with me, do you want to have a quick chat? And I spoke to him, and it was really emotional. It was really like, I hadn't spoken to him in 20 years, and I didn't really know what to say to him. We live lives apart, I live such a different life. And
absolutely, bro. It's sobering to hear, man. Yeah.
It was, and it was a really freaky thing to actually speak to him, and just to see what he's up to, and his day to day was what he was doing at that moment. He was like paranoid because a lot of people were after him for the things that he had done. So he's like, didn't really want to talk about. He was in Wanganui, but didn't even really want to talk where exactly in Wanganui that he was, just in case if people were listening on the phone, and that he knows that they'll be coming for him one day, and really bad stuff. And
sort of a bit off topic, but like we hung out a little bit. You used to phone in my radio show when I was like, God, that was when I just started doing that brekkie show, so you must have left soon after. But so we would have had no idea at the time, because who talks about their family life when you're a teenager, early 20s? But I'm similar to you, like I haven't had a dad that's around. For me, it's because he's been in and out of jail all my life. So I was just going to say, this is a bit of a tangent, but bear with me because you mentioned Wanganui. Like, I even find the influence of that kind of world quite, I feel in the air in a lot of small town places in New Zealand. Like, I feel the uncomfortability of a lot of people kind of living in that world and living that life. Do you know what I mean there?
I find a lot of it, you get...
Do you know what I mean there? That's a bit sort of abstract, eh?
Yeah, it's a real difficult circle to break out of, because if my mum hadn't won the money, which I'm sure we'll get onto, that broke the cycle of me. It gave me that one opportunity to get out and do something, and I did, and I took that opportunity, and I was like, right, I'm going to go overseas and go do this. However, if she didn't win the money, and I still went overseas, it would have been harder, but I still would have done it.
Yeah.
And I still would have probably lived a very similar life.
Like when I met you, I mean, that's why it totally surprised me. Like, by that stage, just for people trying to follow this, to me, there was no way at that stage you would get a suddenly prospect for a gang. That happened when you were much younger. You were already, like, out working in hospo. And so I'll just, a few, like, we're like great storytellers, bro. What a team. Because I'll put some pigs in place here. So, Matt, okay. I don't remember how, but this is me breaking the fourth wall to the audience. Matt, I don't remember how, ended up calling in and doing a chef's thing on my show every week, and I remember it being real fun, and you doing some quite cheeky, weird recipes like hangover cures that were basically smoothies. Very, very of the time. Yeah. But anyway, somehow around then, and this is why I couldn't work out how we hadn't got to know each other better, but then I realised you went overseas in 98. I have a distinct memory of, like, we must have seen each other out or whatever, and you said, bro, do you want to come to my birthday? So I went to your birthday at your family home. I met your mother. And I don't know whether it was just a sort of a story in the air, or whether you I don't think you would have directly told me, but it's like this sort of like literally 1 in a million or probably less story of like, hey, do you know, bro, Matt's mum won all this money recently.
So actually, I remember how we met. We met through Frank Brewer, which is probably not a great story for most of the people listening, but that's how we had met. We had met through him.
Right.
Anyway, just a little bit of history before that. My mum was a secretary for Cable Post Toyota up on the terrace. She got made redundant, and her dream was to open a delicatessen. So she did. She got a massive payout, and she opened a delicatessen in Haitaitai. Unfortunately, over the space of about 2 years, that delicatessen went down. Just around the corner of Foursquare opened, and it's still there today. You probably know the Foursquare.
And so just quickly there, what if we're doing a foodie buzz as well? What era are we talking? Because I'm guessing a deli would have been pretty unusual back then in Wellington, right?
Yeah, it would have been around. I would say about 92 to 93, 94. Yeah. Around then, I was probably, I would say, early teens.
So just after garlic stopped being weird in New Zealand, you know what I mean? Like
exactly.
Anyway, sorry. So your mother bought the deli.
Yeah, my mum bought the deli, and she took it over, and unfortunately, Foursquare just sort of pushed her out, and and nobody wanted her things, and nobody wanted to. Get stuff from her. So it was sort of, that's when her sort of heavy drinking started, because she had a lot of bills and there wasn't enough money coming in. And, we were both had our hands in the tills of, I was a young teenager wanting to get some McDonald's, and she was, a middle-aged woman, wanting to get pissed and go play on the pokies. So I just think from that point, there wasn't much of a chance of the business really succeeding. The one thing is that I wish I knew what I know now, that I could go back and it would be a success. We'd probably have about 19 of those delis and be multi-millionaires living in Parnell.
Yeah. But that's life, isn't it?
But that is life,
Yeah.
And she obviously had to declare bankruptcy, and we got cleared out. And, our family home got cleared out. They even came and took, I had like tapes. I used to record like mixtapes, and I had tapes of Dinosaur Jr. and all these amazing, amazing tapes. They even came and took those, took my socks, bro. What
are they going to do with those? Put those up for auction. Someone's going to buy your stanky old socks.
I know. And believe me, at that age, they were pretty stanky. But that was really heartbreaking. We had some really good friends and family around us that, helped us out and helped us sort of furniture our house and lend us a bit of money. And basically for the next 10 to 12 years after that, we just lived day by day, paycheck to paycheck. I had finished school by then. I had just started a company in Miramar called Pasta Fresca, which was a big factory making fresh pasta. It was the only company in Wellington making fresh pasta at the time. So it was a cool place to work, and it was the first sort of place that I really learned the value of work and working hard and then getting money at the end of it. From that point on, it was really just the journey of understanding of what I wanted to do, and what I wanted to do was music. that's always been my passion. I went to the soul mine as much as you. I picked up every record. My influences around me at the time were people like you and DJ Raw and Moo and all those guys. So, I wanted to do music. That's what I wanted to do. Cooking and learning how to be a chef was secondary to what I wanted to do. But sort of fast forward 10 to 12 years later, a very good friend of mine had managed to get an end of term loan from the bank, and he wanted to take me and him to Australia, and then from there our plan was to save up and then fly to the UK and do music. That's what we both wanted to do. He worked in hospitality, so did I. It would have been easy for us to get jobs. So he's like, before I do that, I'm going to go down to Queenstown and I'm going to party for 6 months, and then I come back and we're going to fly. And on that day, he had gotten back from Queenstown and came over to my house. I was living in Newtown at the time with my girlfriend, who at the time, you might know her as well. It's Kezia.
Oh yeah, Kezia, who lives in LA now.
Yeah, she lives in LA. She's a big thing. Hi, Kezia.
What does she do? I can't quite figure it out. She's not an influencer. She's like an artist. She's a recording artist, eh?
Yeah, a recording artist.
Yeah.
She always had a beautiful voice, and she always sung like an angel. So we were there, and my friend came over, and he was like, "I'm so sorry, but I've spent all the money."
Well, why did you let him go partying for 6 months in Queenstown, bro? I was like, what?
Well, I am terrible with money. Traditionally, I was the worst with money. He was actually okay, Okay. So I was like, I had every faith that this guy would save at least a couple of $100 for me to help fly to Australia. But he came back and said, no, I'd spent all the money. And I swear to you, no word of lie, that at that point, Kezia walked out with a cordless thing, and just said, no, phone, and said, your mum's on the phone, she's crying, she's really upset. So, I grabbed the phone straight away thinking, we'd been burgled quite a few years earlier, so I thought there was another burglary. We didn't have anything to steal, so whatever they would steal, it would be virtually nothing. So I was expecting that, but my mum's like, just come home, I need to talk to you. And so we jumped in my friend's car, we sped round Coven Drive, straight down to Miramar. And mum was on the veranda, she was crying, had her hands and head in her hands, and I walked up to her and it's like, what's wrong? And she just pushed it was like a small yellow piece of paper, but I undid it and it was a lotto ticket. And when I looked at it, it said confirmation win, $100,000, and mum had won on a scratch card.
And that's the biggest. That's a huge. That's the biggest prize I think you can win on those, and it's 20 years ago, so it's probably $1 scratch card. Yeah, she won. And do you know the funniest thing is, and I know that you've just listened to my previous podcast. Just one of them. I listened to the mental health, the one about mental health and hospitality.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So another one, an old friend from New Zealand who knew my mum, and his mother was my mother's best friend. He actually told me, and I never knew it because I never asked. It was such a whirlwind when mum won the money. But my mum had gone to Kilburnie and what her usual ritual was is that she picks up a couple of scratch cards, then she meets up with Alison and they go into bingo together. And she actually scratched it at bingo. So she won it, and the whole room were like erupted, and they were like, oh my God. And then she's like, well, get home. So she went back to the place where she got the card, and basically what it does is they put it through and they give you a confirmation number to say like 100%, it doesn't matter who steals the ticket, whatever, this is you, you've confirmed your identity, don't worry, the money is yours. So that from that point, that's when she came home. She caught the bus home and then sat there and then called me. So God knows how she would have been feeling for that whole time. Like I just would have been going through it.
Yeah, crazy. Maybe getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but, what I heard there, especially because I've just listened to your mental health episode, so it's sort of prescient, is winning $100,000 the best thing for someone with a drinking problem? And Yeah, sort of delicately say that. Yeah,
Yeah,
so might be like sticking a match to Tinder, right?
There is no delicate way to say it, but me and Mum, we enjoyed the money a lot.
Yeah.
When Mum passed away, we didn't have 1 cent of that left.
Yeah.
We probably went through most of that in 3 years.
But even back then,
years,
so substances or whatever aside, like it's not exactly like you won 10 million or whatever or $1 million. Like I think a lot of people could easily get through $100,000 quite quickly.
The thing is that it came to a stage where my mum was just like, look, I want you to enjoy the money as much as that I'm going to enjoy the money. She was never about let's save up, let's get house, let's invest it. She was just like, we've got the money. We paid off every single debt that we'd had. And at the time, like after living, in debt, and my mum was like, she paid off her bankruptcy and she didn't have much to go, to be honest. She, pretty much like all of her credit cards and stuff, she paid off all my credit cards. I had a small student loan. She paid that off as well. So, it was...
It's really caring, mate. She reset you for what I think you were getting to, which is the new plan for going overseas. In light of the new news, right? So you head over in what? 98?
Yeah, so 1997 in December, I flew to Sydney, Australia. Which was... It was madness. I'd never been out of the country. As you were saying earlier about like wanting to get into gangs and sort of things like this, it never was a concept to me to leave New Zealand. Never was an idea. And to actually be standing on Australian soil, it was bizarre to me to stand on Oxford Street in Australia and just watch these people walk past me. Like I'd never seen this many people in my life in one place, and it was like 30 degrees and there was bats flying around and huge birds walking out of bins and cockroaches the size of your arm. And it was just madness. All I wanted to do was just drink and enjoy it and, go and soak in what Sydney was, and at the time it was a really, really buzzy place with, a lot of Maoris ran the clubs over there, basically ran all the security. So, the minute that you go up to any club and they just took one look at me and they were like, you don't stand at the end of the line, bro. Come here.
Awesome.
I was like, okay, yes, sweet as. And they were looking after me majorly, It was cool with, we had some, a horrible thing happened in Sydney, so we didn't actually stay that long, It was a bit of a weird one, but, we were staying in a hostel in Bondi, and we could at the time, me and my friend, we wanted to be close together, so we just said like, in the hostel, it was during Christmas time as well, we had asked him, do you have like rooms with a couple of spare beds? He goes, I've only got one double bed. And me and my mate were like, yeah, cool, we'll just top and tail, it's not a problem.
It's cool, we've been on Oxford Street, we're back to school.
Yeah. This is what I think that they thought. And on Christmas Day, my mate went to go visit. He had family in Sydney. I had no family there. I just found a drum and bass party on Bondi Beach, so I was down there like completely off my nut, just having the best time in the world. And he came down a few hours later after his Christmas lunch and said, hey man, we need to get out of here, man. This is like, I've just been back to our room and it's been trashed. And I was like, what do you mean it's been trashed? He goes, yeah, but nothing's been stolen. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he goes, but I found this. And he opened up this envelope. And at the time I had dreadlocks and he had sort of blonde, long hair. And there was a lock of his hair and a dreadlock with blood all over it on this envelope. So we took that as a sign to get the hell out really quickly. So we did. And what
was that about? My terrible joke, do you think it was actually like a gay, like someone doing a hate crime thing?
Yeah, I do think it was. I think it was just like I suppose at the time, like my friend is and still is to this day, very, very good looking man. And I suppose it was probably when I was a little bit skinnier, looked a little bit cooler with my long dreads. And, I don't know if you remember my dreads, but I had like a couple of blonde ones as well. So
I don't want to dwell on this too much, but I mean, what's that person doing staying around King's Cross? Like, it's what a terrible human being, whoever that was. That's an awful story.
Yeah, I know, right?
You know,
I know, that's
more so. I mean, for you guys, but for the safety of any, actual couples that had stayed there, that's horrific. Anyway, Jesus, that's shaking me a little bit.
Yeah, it was, and it was,
get out of touch.
That it was that, and we thought, okay, cool, let's just get out of here because, like, we're not that way inclined. However, I didn't want to be anywhere near a place that
you don't want to be pleading that case either. And so, are you starting is music still the focus? We're going to go to London. We're going to make music, but I'm guessing you're still getting hospo work to get by. What's the transition there?
I was still working for hospitality. We went to Melbourne, where I had a couple of friends from Wellington that were living in Melbourne at the time. I don't know. Again, I'm going to name a couple of people. This is probably not good for your listeners. But do you remember Jeannie and Aroha? You would remember them from Cuba.
If we're very late 90s, one thing you might not know is from about 2000, 2001 onwards, like heaps of people from that kind of central Wellington scene moved over there, like a bunch of hospo people. I lived there for 6 years, man. 6 or 7 years.
Okay.
Yeah, 2001 to 2007. Last thing on Aussie for me, when you talked about arriving, just like the flora and fauna and Oxford Street, like just culturally as well, like people who say New Zealand and Australia are pretty much the same are so far off.
They're so far off. It's such a different country and such different people. But you know what? I loved Aussie. It was I had such little brother syndrome when I went there. I had been ingrained by my mum and by my uncle about the sport and about Aussie's crap at this, and I just found them to be the loveliest people. Everyone that I met, I got on with, and I fell in love with. I just absolutely always.
My thing was, I realised, and I think you might relate to this because I related to some of your story around sort of anxiety and stuff, which I didn't even realise that was a thing I'd had all my life till recent years, and I can identify it now, which is good. But what I liked about Australian culture, and like anything, this can be for better or for worse, is, how do I put it? New Zealanders have kind of more rules socially and stuff. I mean, like Australians are a bit more like, let's just get into it, and I don't know. It's like less. I don't know if anal is the right word, but there's a kind of there's a freedom to their culture, whereas Kiwis don't. A lot of us don't realise this. We have a lot more social rules, is how I'll put it. I'm not meaning in like what you can and can't do kind of a way. I'm meaning that they're just more of a relaxed culture, is the way I'd put it.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel. In New Zealand, it was really hard for me growing up. There's no easy way to put this. I was a mistake, and my mum never treated me as a mistake. It was, I think I was the result of, a bit of a fling my mum had with a young married man. And my family are all white. Yeah. They're all English heritage. They're all like direct lineages. I've been actually tracing my family tree, and I've gone back to the 1400s. It's insane. I've got family that were yeomen of the waters for Henry VIII, and if you want to talk about white English, I've got a direct line that goes absolutely clearly all the way down. And when I was born, that I felt that from a lot of just society at the time, where it was probably just on the cusp of interracial marriages and interracial sex, I suppose. And I suppose with my family, pretty much keeping to themselves for many, many years, all the way back to, my great grandfather stepping off one of the colonial ships in Greytown. They've pretty much kept to themselves. So I felt that growing up. So that's where the beginning of my anxieties started because I'm like, well, I don't ever fit. I never fit with the Maori, and I never fit with my Pākehā mates. And when I left New Zealand, I'm like, hang on, I fit now, and it's really weird feeling like that.
But look, that's getting a little bit deep on it. But I've thought that.
Yeah.
I've thought that often that you know, a lot of Māori end up in Australia because they're not. There's not the same cultural baggage as there is here. You know, that's a sad thing. So you guys jump on a plane and you end up in London, which was probably where I went next after Australia. Yeah. That's another culture shock. Yeah. And I realised that, you know, pre-internet and stuff, I so wasn't worldly, Matt. Like, I remember in the cab, like, some 8-year-old, like, looking for, like, Big Ben, because I remembered it from, like, you know, that's one of the few things, you know, about London from childhood. So you feel pretty green there as well?
Mate, it was the biggest wake-up call for me, like, when I arrived in London, and I got lost at the airport, and my mate was supposed to meet me, and he was in the wrong terminal. So I was the same. I jumped into a cab, and the cab driver was like, "All right, geezer, we got you, mate. Come on, don't worry, we'll take you into London town." Yeah. And you know, he like charged me the earth to get where I needed to go. But he's like, "Oh, don't worry, I'll take you past Buckingham Palace. Like, let's go through here. Don't worry."
You feel like Paddington Bear, eh? You got got a marmalade sandwich under your hat.
And he was like, "All right, mate, that's 250 quid," which was at the time about $750 on a cab ride. And I was like, "Oh, wow, okay, well, hey, Mum, do you think you could take some money?" No. She goes, I gave you loads. What have you done with it? And I was like, "I got a cab." But my first experience is that we were staying at a friend of mine's house, and she was quite affluent. We met her in Melbourne, and I didn't realise how affluent she was. She had a house in Pall Mall. Right. So they call it Pall Mall over here. But, like, if you... Like, the property in Pall Mall is probably about £15 million. So that's, like, triple that for New Zealand. This house was stunning. And I turned up, and, like, they were upstairs, and they were having bottles of champagne, and I arrived, and it was like a bit of a champagne reception. I'd been on a plane for 30 hours, and I was knackered, and then they were like, "Look, we're going to take you out to Soho." And, you know, we just jumped into a taxi. We went to Soho, and it was a Saturday night, and I'll just never forget getting out at Leicester Square because they wanted us, me and my friend, to experience what London's all about. So you're getting out of a place where it's like 150,000 people on a Saturday night. This isn't Manners Mall. You're not in Manners Mall anymore.
Yeah, that's right.
This is like unreal, just a multi-mix of thousands of people just doing stuff. And it was really overwhelming. And we went to a bar, and straight away they were pulling out shots of tequila, and then it just all hit me. It was just like, it was really overwhelming. I was just like, I need to get some sleep because my mind doesn't process this. My body is not ready for this. My mind is not ready for what it's seen. It's just such
you've been on a long haul flight, and that's the age where you don't look after yourself properly. You did actually need to sleep, bro. You can't get over. You know, it's having said all of that, I landed in, actually I just realised I'd come from Dublin because I went to that Red Bull Academy for a year, and so then I went to London, had my visa, and so unbeknownst to me, same sort of story, but particularly like overwhelming London day or weekend, especially considering the kind of music I was really into. I landed on the first day of bank holiday weekend, and I get to the quay, and he goes, "It's Carnival Day." I go, "Is it Notting Hill Carnival today?"
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I managed 2 hours later, I'm like, da-da-da-da-da-da, behind the phone. I'm like getting right into it. I'm like, I've got to the point where I've got like West Indian and African people in some places looking at me like, this white guy's a bit too full on. Because I was just like, I already knew so much. Yeah.
You know, out of the 22 years, 23 years I've been here, I've missed one carnival.
Right. Yeah, well, I tried something I'd not ever tried before that day. That's easier to come by in London than it is Wellington, and then on to the Red Stripes.
Yeah, I know. I've experienced that many times. It's actually a really wonderful carnival.
Oh, it's amazing. The food, the colour, all those sound systems. You know.
We go now just to go for the food, watch the parades and processions. I'm at an age now where I can't sit there for 2 days just dancing in the middle of a street. It's now just actually seeing the culture of it. And it's really beautiful. I love it. It sort of recharges my cultural batteries. So I love going down.
I even just having been once, even just looking at the photos every year, just because there's some serious photo opportunities at that carnival. Some of the headdresses and the colour and all of that. Like I'm going to go back one day. When you come here, we're going to hang out. Definitely. Okay. I was 24. I was 24 then. That was year 2000, Matt. So it's a while ago.
Wow.
Are we going to get to your the main part of your cooking career? We might have to do a double episode.
Yeah,
no, we're only half an hour in. That's all good. It's an interesting story.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that was my question. So segue there, my buzz in London. Well, actually, it was because if I knew now what I did then, I would have humbled myself and just got some work that I thought I can do better than that. I ended up actually in worse work because I waited around and I needed money basically to stay there. So I ended up in that trap of being above a pub and working for like £3 an hour with a free accommodation. So you can't really maneuver out of that. You fell into quite good chefing work, right? Because what I'm getting at there is there's shitloads of low-paid, exploitative hospitality work, especially places like London. But you actually started off on fairly good footing, right?
I had no idea about London. I didn't know where the areas were, like how to get there. The tube map to me was like an electrical board. It was I couldn't work it out. I was absolutely terrified to go into central London because the amount of people, and I just didn't know how to act, how to be, how to look for work. And a friend of mine had said to me, there's a newspaper that comes out every Thursday, and in there you'll find jobs. So on Thursday I went down and bought the newspaper and opened it up, and I saw a few chef jobs that were being advertised. And so I called the first one, and I spoke to the head chef, and the head chef's like, just so you know, I don't do interviews. Just come in, work a day, and I'll see how you get on. And so I was like, okay, cool. So where is it? He goes, well, it's in Soho. You come to this door, push the buzzer, and wait, and somebody will come and get you. And I'm like, okay, this sounds a bit dodgy, but yeah, fine. Yeah, whatever. So I ended up, I managed to get there. It was an early start. We had to be there at 7 o'clock in the morning. We're there, pushed the buzzer. Lady came down and answered, and she's like, who are you? I said, I'm here for a job trial in the kitchen. She's like, 1 second. She goes away, comes back. The head chef comes back, and he's like, hey, how you doing? Come in, takes me up to the top to get changed in the staff room, and then we're straight into the kitchen. And basically he's like, look, there's a couple of rules here. You're not allowed to go out front of house. No matter what, you have to stay here in the kitchen. When you have your break, you can have it in the staff room, or you leave the business. You go out, and I'll show you where the staff entrance is. Staff food's cooked at 4 o'clock. Let's go, and we'll start cooking. And when I started in this kitchen, I generally, food and cooking wasn't my passion at the time. Music was my passion.
Yeah.
But when I looked around, I was amongst these like masters of what they were doing, and I was looking around just absolutely blown away by the skill level of these guys, the speed that they were working, the amount of times they would be tasting dishes, like using this produce and using it in a way where you didn't pre-make it 3 days before and let it sit in the chiller and then put it into a deep fryer. They didn't even have a deep fryer there. And then when we got into service, they're making all this food to order, and it was, I'd never worked in a kitchen like that since Dockside when I did my first training, basically.
Yeah.
Anyway, at the end of the day, the guy's like, look, I love you. You're really good. I'm going to offer you a position as a chef de partie. You start tomorrow. And it was for Soho House, which is now one of the most iconic, brands in the world. But they had just been open for about 6 months to a year.
So is this like, can I, is it unfair to say that it's almost like you got your finger out and you went, like, no one can see me, but you went like bonk on the listings and went, I'll ring that one. Was it that random?
Yeah, that's how random it was.
Amazing.
Yeah. I had absolutely no idea who these people were, but now I do, and now I look back and how lucky I was, especially to work with the two head chef and the executive chef there. Both of their pedigree are like Marco Pierre White and Gordon Ramsay.
Amazing.
And like these guys just like they were outstanding, and I didn't know who these people were. So all the chefs that were working in that kitchen knew Gordon Ramsay and Marco Pierre White and what these guys were doing. And, just as I started with this business, like their restaurants, this was the time of Harvey's, which is Marco Pierre White, and then Gordon Ramsay, had the aubergine at the time. It's very sort of famous that when, he parted ways with the owners of aubergine, he left and, without, any sort of pushing, his whole staff walked with him. They said, well, if he's leaving, we don't want to work with anyone but Gordon. And I remember being, in Soho House at the time and hearing about this and thinking, wow, that's so cool. Who is this guy? But I understood because the guys that I was working with were like artisans. They were masters of what they did. And I kept on saying to everybody, like, I don't understand like where you've been trained or how this could be a passion, because in New Zealand where I worked it was a job, it wasn't a passion. Never was.
Although that changed in the years after you left, but totally, because I did do a double episode. The only double episode I've done was with Martin Bosley, and we talked about that transition, and lovely guy, and that transition in New Zealand. It was fascinating to learn about that. So you kind of, because it's pre-internet as well, so you can't, well, it's not pre-internet, but we're not looking stuff up like we are now to figure out who are these guys and all the rest of it, right?
This is all like word of mouth.
But I was going to say two things I was going to say, like it sounds like your guilelessness, you're sort of like not being overly intimidated or impressed by all of this from the outset was probably a strength without you realizing it. It's just like put your head down, mahi hard, like look at what's going on, but not kind of get freaked out in the circles that you're working with, because I'm sure that would have taken a few other people down in a way.
I never forget one of the first things that they said to me, and it stuck with me. And I've used the same line on many, many Kiwi chefs that I've worked with over the years, is that it was probably my second day, and I remember the executive chef coming in, and I was actually quite scared of this guy, loveliest guy, probably one of the loveliest people I've ever worked with. His name was Paul Bavani, and he had actually said to me, he's like, welcome to the team. And he goes, just so you know, every single Kiwi that I've worked with have been the hardest workers I've ever worked with in my life. He goes, if any Kiwi ever walked into my kitchen, I wouldn't even interview them. I'll just give them a job straight away. And I was really honoured by that.
Yeah, that's cool,
like,
man.
Wow.
Yeah.
And Kiwis have got such a hugely highly regarded work ethic in London, and they're loved, absolutely adored in this city. So, I think I was really lucky to get this opportunity, plus hearing it from the executive chef, where everyone goes, okay, well, this guy must be pretty good. I wasn't the greatest cook, and I was really lucky to work with some amazing people that brought me up to speed really quickly.
Did you used to be
taught me how to work at that?
Does my memory serve very correctly that you used to be I was trying to remember the name of it today, at Neo, where we'd get our deep fried $10 breakfasts? Mate, there was a powerful amount of food for $10, even back then.
Oh my God, I forgot about Neo.
He was a lovely guy. I remember your boss being a nice guy up on that corner. He was cool. And there was a bunch of you that were like active listeners. There's no other way to put this, your mate who's quite a short fella.
Yeah.
Do you remember who that is? Like, I remember a bunch of you working there. Maybe just...
There was me and another guy called Whippy, or Chris. We called him Mr. Whippy because that's how we met him. He used to work as Mr. Whippy selling weed.
Oh my God, my friend Tomo did the same. He had $23 ice cream cones.
that's how we met Whippy. But yeah, it was me and Whippy that used to work up at Neo. Yeah, so it was, I remember those times. Wow!
But even then, $10, yeah, that was cheap. That was an artery hardener, though. I think that's still when you could smoke cigarettes at the table. Oh my god!
Yeah. Well, the thing is I'll never forget at Soho House, you could still smoke inside.
Yeah.
So we used to, we never used to go outside. We used to go up to the staff room, which was literally like one floor above the kitchen. And we used to sit there and just open the window and look out to Soho. We're across the road from, I think it was the Prince Andrew Theatre. And we used to sit there and just smoke and watch people walk past and watch all the...
I don't know if you know these days, but I just fell into this. No, the only thing I didn't plan for was become my career after that 30 years onwards. I teach now, I lecture, work at a uni, and tell my students, and it does probably these days by now sounds like a million years ago to them, but not us. And I've told this story on the podcast before. Who would have thought that as late as 1995, when I was at Vic Uni, my religions tutor would, in this tiny little, classroom in Kelburn in Wellington, because they're all old wooden houses, would light up a cigarette and say, smoke as well if you want to smoke. If you don't smoke, open the window. And those little sash windows in New Zealand, with the silver handle, the ones I'm meaning, eh? So there's these poor students. I think about it now. These poor students, two holes on the sash window open. They got to sit through their tutorial. Crazy, eh? You probably get locked up.
I remember,
but actually quite disgusting. The tobacco companies did well there, man. You remember?
I was about to say, I remember every pub coming home from the pub and my dreadlocks just reeking of cigarettes.
Yeah. La Luna, disgusting. Smell terrible in the morning. Other question on New Zealand, and I can't remember where this came up last time. Might have just even been in conversation with someone. Because I was talking about, it might actually been the last episode I did. Anyway, that doesn't matter. The hospitality wages in New Zealand, disgraceful. Do you think it's justified, or do you think it's I've often heard that the reason is that, small population, small trade, hard to get by, high prices. I've never known, because that's right. The conversation was when I moved to Australia, and suddenly everyone's got more dollar in their pocket, which makes living different. Yeah, it's a total departure from what we're talking about. But what do you think, it's justified here, or it's a bit of a problem?
Not at all. I don't think it's justified anywhere. I've been a massive advocate in London for changing wages and getting chefs a proper London living wage. I've watched so many chefs scraping by, just trying to support their families. I've watched chefs not being able to afford houses. What have you got? It's nothing. And then when I came home a few years ago, when Mum was passing away, I still have a lot of friends that work in the industry, and it was horrific what these people were getting paid. And do you know what? In London, I run kitchens of 20 to 30 chefs strong. In New Zealand, you're doing the same numbers with 4 chefs.
Wow.
And getting paid less. So these business owners need to look at the model and change what they can and try to, instead of cut on the wages. And I get it. Look, I'm a business owner. I understand. But I've always been a people person, and it's something that I am very, very passionate about. So if I'm going to, run a business, I probably wouldn't run it profitably, but I would make sure that every single one of my team were well paid, well looked after, which makes it kind of happy. And
but bro, has it occurred to you? You say that joking, you've done the wrong thing, but you know what I hear there is the whole economy is focused on growth. It's all about GDP, has been for decades. But you're actually talking about sustainability instead. You're talking about having a business where everyone is fed well, paid well, you make enough money to run it. So I wouldn't scoff at that. I think that's kind of, without getting too deep on it, this humanity's way forward. We can't keep growing. How can we keep growing?
I'm really.
It's 40 degrees in London. It's raining here months and months a year.
Yeah.
That's what growth's doing, bro.
Absolutely. As I said, I've been really lucky to work with some incredible people in London.
Yeah.
One of them is another mutual friend who you might remember, a guy called Miles Kirby. Miles, Chris and Laura, they own a group of restaurants over here called Caravan. It was my last employment, actually, and I worked with them for 8 years, growing their business from 2 restaurants to 7. And their mentality is a very, very Kiwi mentality. It's like, we will look after you, and they were huge advocates in paying everybody what they're worth. They were huge advocates in a work-life balance. And they were huge advocates of looking after people. And, we have become, I say we, but them, and I was part of the team at the time, have become legends in London for it because, we are very well known, or we're very well known now for looking after people,
So if you put a number on it, if you put a number on it like they do with the minimum wage, and I've seen it done with the living wage here, if there was a living wage in London, what would it be per hour in pounds?
So they say at the moment that living wage should be in the vicinity of about £28,000 a year.
Yeah.
I personally think that 32 would be a little bit more appropriate.
Yeah.
That will give you a little bit of fat to say, I can save, or I can go out this weekend. I can save up for a holiday.
That's right. That's no. You're so funny because that's totally great the way you put it, because it's like you've just brought up. Well, define the word living, right? Living. Okay, some bureaucrat might go, well, that's paying your rent and paying your weekly food bill, but actually living is actually getting some time out from your work so that you come back to your work clear-headed and rested. Good on you, man. Rested and
ready to go. So we've always been huge advocates for that. So again, as I said, I've been really lucky to have those guys in my life for many years, and they still are. They're still very much the people that I love to work with today, and they're really great people.
Because the other thing I noticed with New Zealand Hospo, and I don't know if it's unique to here, but it's another comparison I noticed with Australia. This is like 20 plus years ago, but I still kind of see it here. As I feel like I noticed straight away in Australia that Hospo, I feel like here it's often seen as something you do while you're training or wanting to be something else. And so when I went to Australia, it was refreshing to see like service staff going, I want to start here and then I want to be there, I want to be there.
Well, the thing is that what happened in New Zealand is very similar to what they had the brilliant idea in this country called Brexit. Yeah. Excellent idea. Well done. Just absolutely decimate 1 million people from the hospitality workforce. You guys had a very similar thing. Let's lock down New Zealand for 2 years and not let anyone come in. So, the migrant workforce, it just decimated it. And they're like, well, we don't want to come back now, or it's harder for them to come back and to work and to make money, and it's tough. I have a couple of friends that are really struggling at the moment to try and find, decent people and decent chefs in New Zealand at the moment. And it's, I'm talking to them a lot because one, I can always offer good moral advice, and they're trying to sort of think about other ideas that they can do to pivot their business or to do different things. But at the same time, do I know any chefs heading home, that could help them out? Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, and I've got quite a big reach on Instagram. So sometimes I post on my Instagram or, on my stories that, I've got friends in New Zealand that are looking for work. So trying to help them out as much as possible. But, they're just, the workforce isn't there and the money's not there. But like I've been told and offered on numerous occasions, like, why don't you come to Australia? Like, what you know now and what we can pay you whatever you want with a house and a car. It's not my time for Australia yet. It will be one day. But at the moment, no.
Yeah. So you kind of, it's interesting. You kind of tangentially answered that in saying that when you come back, it'll be to Australia, not New Zealand.
Yeah.
It's sad.
There's no money at home.
The sad thing is that life in general in New Zealand, I think, is way tougher for a lot of people than it was in the era we're talking about when you and I met. And it's that whole thing of like, this is oversimplifying it, but the way I see it is it's that trickle-down economics that never trickled down from the 80s. It's really started to hit hard here. And it's just hard, bro. It's like I'm quite sensitive to even just being out and about. And I don't like, I mean, I live in central Auckland, which doesn't help for this. I just don't like how many people I see struggling. It's so different to the New Zealand we know.
When I came home, it was a really different place, and it scared the living hell out of me. You know, I wasn't home for good reasons, but when I came home, it's always a warm hug. It's always like, oh, I'm home and everything is going to be okay. And all as I saw was division, like the rich, just unbelievably rich, and the poor, unbelievably poor, and no one's helping each other.
It's sobering to hear, Matt. When were you back? 2 years ago,
I came back in 2021.
Yeah.
My mum had suffered a stroke, and New Zealand was locked down, basically. So I ended up having a 8-day fight with immigration and Mrs. Ardern to try and get back into the country, because they weren't allowing anybody in. Thank God, out of compassion, and because I don't have any brothers or sisters, or there wasn't any family near, I was allowed to come back, which was a blessing, basically. But, you know, when I came back, did I come back to a good place? No.
I just realised, in New Zealand's defence, after I started this conversation, but, I mean, that was pretty weird over lockdown. So all of that feeling would have been amplified as well.
Yeah, yeah. And I get that. You know, I had friends that were really suffering mentally from it, and I had, you know, a lot of friends that were just, you know, at the time they just started these protests by government, and, you know, I remember that these people were setting up camps there, and I had friends doing YouTube videos and flying drones over Parliament, or trying to fly drones over Parliament about, you know, letting the world know what's happening. It was just a mad time to be in New Zealand. I'd never seen anything like that before, and it was kind of scary. But I remember Mum, when she was in intensive care, she could talk a little bit, and some of the things that, you know, I was telling her what's going on, and I'll never forget her looking at me, and she just said, "Don't worry about it. It will sort itself out. You know, don't hold any grudges. She just knows me really well. She knew that I came back, and it was a real bitter taste in my mouth. And she's like, she knew she was going to die. Yeah. And we all knew that she was going to die. But she's like, don't hold any grudges. You know, don't worry. It's going to get better, you know. And I still kind of feel to this day like, no matter what, this is your home. You know, like, even though that I'm going to go, and that was your last connection to our home. This is where you're from. This is where you're home, and, you know, you still come home to get those batteries recharged, you know.
I didn't realise you were an only child as well. Wow. Did your mum ever visit you in London over those years?
No, she was petrified of flying.
Wow.
I haven't had many friends come over. I've literally had a couple of friends that have come over. Some friends that were just passing through London. They were doing a bit of a European tour. And another one, it's quite hilarious, I'm not going to say his name, but he had an argument with his wife, so he jumped on a plane and flew to London. Yeah. Which was hilarious. He called me up in Singapore and said, "Hey, what are you up to in 17 hours?" And I was like, working? And he's like, "Oh, I'll be in London. Can I come stay with you?" And it was bizarre. It was the most bizarre time, but we had such a great time. He stayed with me for a couple of weeks and bought loads of presents for his kids and went back, and his missus was like, "You're mad. You're crazy." But he's like, "Yeah, well, we shouldn't have argued," which was hilarious.
Because I've heard similar stories where someone's like, they stay with their mate like 6 blocks away in the same suburb. He flew to the other side of the world.
Yeah. And it was, for me, I was blessed because I hadn't had many of my friends come over. You know, it's a long trip, and it's an expensive trip as well. So I totally understand, and I never sort of put pressure on any of my friends coming over and stuff. But
let's go back to the timeline. You end up, and by the last joke I was going to make about, because I like making jokes, the last thing I was going to say about that first spot you got working in London, like, obviously when you saw the level of service and quality of food and whatever, you know, you quickly would have had a general gist of why you weren't allowed in the main dining hall, as it were. But initially, it could have been like, shivers, who am I cooking for? Like a bunch of secret Nazis? You just go, what's through that wall? But I'd imagine, quickly, I'm guessing it was the who's who of London that you were cooking for.
Yeah, at the time,
yeah.
I didn't know any of these people. Like, I had heard of these people. There were times where, like, oh, Elton John's in here and he's eating this, and this. And you're like, okay, you don't know, you can't see it. Like, you're just cooking for normal people. So I'd heard of him.
What do you mean you'd heard of him? Everyone knows who Elton John is. You can't play.
I didn't care for it. I was young. I was, like, really into, like, I think it was Hard House at the time. So I was just like, yeah, I just like, if it's anything to do with Hard House, I love it. But at the time, I don't really care. But like, I suppose of working in this space and in this kitchen, we were pulling like 14, 15, 16-hour days. So
yeah.
I would hear a lot, and the head chefs and the sous chefs and all the other chefs would tell me about London and give me the heads up. Go see this place. Go check that place out. When you've got a day off, go here, go watch a football game. These are the teams that you need to support. Don't ever call it soccer. We were all really, really close. Like we went out together. When we finished, we all went out together. We partied together. We drank together.
And you somehow end up working for Gordon Ramsay, followed by Jamie Oliver, right? How many people can say that?
Yeah. That was a bit of that was a little bit of a journey, sort of after sort of Soho House. I'd worked at a couple of places, previous to that, but I was at Bluebird in Chelsea working for one of the best chefs in the country, and then I had an opportunity to go work at Maze, which was owned by Gordon Ramsay, but ran by one of his proteges, a guy called Jason Atherton. Now, at the time, it was the hottest restaurant in London, and I had gotten to a stage in my career where I was like, I need to go work for the best. And right at this point, this guy is the best, and I jumped ship and went to go work for this guy, and this is where I learned, like, at a really, really high level of what it takes to hold Michelin stars, why they do what they do and how they do it. And, it was, for me, to be totally honest, a masterclass in what not to do.
Is this to do with how you treat other people, or?
Yeah, very much.
Yeah.
Very much. I won't really get into it very much because, I do know a lot of those guys and do work, and I respect them a lot, but it's a very high-powered, high-pressured environment, and I'm trying to be very political in the way that I say this.
Diplomatic, and also the other thing we could say diplomacy-wise is it was 15, 20 years ago, and a whole lot of attitudes around workplaces and whatever have changed hugely in that time, right? Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm proud to be one of those people that have changed, because I have worked in that environment, and people have followed me and come work for me, and they were like, "Wow, you don't do that. Why don't you do that?" And it's like, because I don't like it. I don't like being spoken to like that. I don't like being treated like that. I don't like being do like that. I'm not going for Michelin stars. What I always say, the way that I run restaurants or have ran restaurants, is that I don't care about the food. I don't care about the drink.
Yeah.
I don't care about the service. What I care about is the person. Get the person right, everything else will click into place.
That's hospitality. That's hospitality. That's what hospitality is.
That's what exactly what hospitality is. It's a service industry. We look after people. We don't we're not army. We don't drill these people down to within an inch of themselves. Saying that, on the other side,
I was going to say, but hang on, but on the third day that person burns that thing.
Yeah. Then you tear their head off.
Yeah. That's a 60 pound, yeah. So that thing of working, quote unquote, working for Gordon Ramsay, the guys like that at that level have got such a business portfolio. Like, were you actually dealing with the guy at all? Did you meet him? And
so I met him on a couple of occasions. It was pretty terrifying, actually. There was one Sunday where I was asked to run the pass, basically.
Yeah.
And, I basically, the pass is facing the kitchen, and you had all these sections in front of you, and had, upwards of about 11 chefs. And what you're doing is you're sort of orchestrating as the dishes are coming up to you and how they come up to you and the speed that they come up to you, and you're calling out numbers and time and sort of things like that. Then all of a sudden I called out something, and like the kitchen was just dead silent, and they were just looking at me utterly petrified. And I was wondering why I wasn't getting anything back. It was like, come on. And then I realized that there was somebody standing behind me, and I turned around and it was Gordon, and he was just sitting there smiling at me. And he's like, "Hey, chef, how you doing?" And it was like, "Oh wow!"
Yeah. Hey, you just did a scene from one of his telly shows, like what you just described is a scene from one of his shows, man.
And then he'd come hang out with me a little bit on the pass, and watch the way that I plated some food, and he went around and said hello to all the other chefs. He's very respectful. He's a great man.
Because the anger's really staged, but you can tell that you can tell that he's a lovely guy, right? That's he is an amazing guy. Yeah.
I worked with quite a few of his chefs throughout the career, and one of the most beautiful stories that I remember when he was running Hospital Road. So he was there every day.
Yeah,
he would roll pasta. He did lobster pasta every morning, and every morning he would choose a chef to come do it with him. He wanted every single person to be as knowledgeable as him and learn from him and get that time. Now, as I've gotten older and as now I'm a leader and a manager and not understand people, it was such a genius way to get some one-on-one time with your team.
Yeah.
To ask them just questions like how they're getting on, what are they struggling with, how's the parents, how's your family, how's your children.
So it's the nuclear family dinner at the table at 6 o'clock, right?
Yeah, but he's working at the same time. So he's talking, he's bantering, he's taking these things. And then, this guy, a couple of weeks down, was his birthday. He opens up the door, there's a package there for him. And, there was a, load of presents from corners, like chocolates and, tickets to drive a Ferrari and, all these really, really cool presents that he had got. And he's like, Gordon got that from me from a 45-minute session rolling pasta, and I thought that to me was really special. That was like some of the techniques that I've used in my career when I've, been teaching people, basically.
Yeah, that was May's Grill. Where was that in London?
That is in Grosvenor Square.
So I need you to give me the tube directions from May's Grill to Threadneedle Street, which is where you then worked for Jamie Oliver.
Wow, you've got me there. I think you would have to walk to Bond Street.
Hey, wait. How's that day when you realise that map's not drawn to scale and that it's actually like 2 blocks to walk from one tube stop to the other in town? Because especially when you're a Wellingtonian and you're used to walking. That was amazing for me. I was like, okay, now I can get around here a lot quicker because a lot of these tube stops.
Yeah.
By the time you go down and jump on and come back up, it's like 20. Yeah. Sorry.
I generally now I only ever walk around central London.
Yeah.
Because it's the easiest.
Yes, right. That's right. Sorry, no, don't worry about the tube map. Let's say you walked. You ended up, but you did end up going to work for Jamie Oliver. Is that next after Gordon?
Well, it wasn't quite next. I went to go work for another restaurant called Valandry, which was actually originally owned by Martha Stewart. Yeah. Can I just turn on the light?
Yeah, you can. I wonder whether you I thought you were doing some mood lighting thing for me. I wasn't going to say anything.
Yeah. Starting to get quite dark now.
Yeah.
So originally this was a large, what can I call it, a gastrodome in Great Portland Street called Valandry. And I went to go work for them for a few years before I jumped ship and went to go work with Jamie. But at the time, Jamie's Italian were at, I think it was about 22 restaurants they had opened in the UK. And I was looking for work, and I got to meet one of the chef recruiters who's now become a very close friend of mine. And we started just chatting and talking about what they were after. And I wasn't keen because Jamie's Italian was very much a branded restaurant. So it's basically written for what you are going to cook. And at the time, I was very creative, and I've always been a really creative chef. And I was like, well, I want to write my own menus. I don't want to do this. So I'm not really keen on, jumping ship and becoming with Jamie. So he's like, look, there's going to be Threadneedle Street, which is going to be an Italian restaurant or Italian themed, but, we want to give the chef there, a lot of autonomy. So it was pretty much from that point where it sort of piqued my interest, and I was like, okay, cool. So we did the cook-offs, and, I hung out with all the executives and Jamie's right-hand men and women, and, went through that whole process, and, I got offered Jamie's Italian Threadneedle Street, which was an honor. It's kind of where I suppose the rise to where I'm at now.
Look, I find often New Zealanders in particular find it hard to answer questions like the one I'm about to ask, because we can be quite humble buggers. But you just basically said that a chef recruiter for Jamie Oliver, you said, no, I don't want to do that for Jamie Oliver. I want to do this for Jamie Oliver. And he went, okay, we can accommodate you. What is it about your chefing and your cooking, and also just word about you getting out around London? Like, what is it that sets you apart from others?
I think, I'd worked for Jason, and I was pretty, and I'd been at Valandry, and before that I'd been at Soho House, and before that I'd been at Bluebird. So the trajectory of my CV was impressive to anybody. So as a business owner, especially like Jamie took a look at it and said, well, this guy's got the goods.
Yeah,
he says what he could do on the box. Let's see what the young boy has.
Yeah,
and it very much was that. It was like during the cook-off, so it was like, okay, come up with some dishes and you do it, and let's see your interpretation of Italian food, and and for me it was a masterclass of Italian food. That like his right hand man's Gennaro Contaldo, who is like trained from Antonio Carlucci. They had multiple TV shows together. It's like, I'm going into a world of Italian food, and Jamie, out of every single chef in the world, is probably the most respected in Italy. Like,
really, I had no idea.
Like he is like literally, he's like a member of like the Italian Order of the Highest,
which is interesting because, like, to me, the cleverness of Jamie as a sort of a someone who does cookbooks as a product is he's more about everyman cooking. It's really clever. Like, a lot of his cookbook is like just showing someone how to roast a flash roast chicken. Some of them are like, but what? That's not a knock. That's not a knock, because it was back then, 20, 25 years ago, it was getting people into cooking who weren't really. It's like, oh, I can make that and I can say it's this, So it's interesting, that, and it doesn't surprise me that he's actually got that level of prestige and chops, as it were. So same question I asked about Gordon with Jamie. You met him and spent some time with him, or?
I know Jamie better than I know Gordon. I can count Jamie as a friend.
Oh, that's cool, bro.
Which I'm really honoured about. I worked for Jamie nearly 4 years, and
you'd be about the same age, eh? You'd be about the same age, I reckon.
He's 1 year younger than me.
Yeah.
So, I confidently say that we'll chat, once every couple of months when he's got 5 minutes. Sometimes he'll send me a message and say, how have I been? What have I been up to? He met up with Miles last week, which was really nice because they're sort of talking about some projects together. And, I was one of the mentors for Jamie's 15. His 15
great,
program was taking the 15 students, 15 students and teaching them how to cook. And so while the 15 program was going, I was, the mentor for them for over 5 years. So
it's a cliched question, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer. Like, was that really rewarding doing the youth mentoring stuff?
It was bizarre because when I was working at Threadneedle Street, I never forget being asked, I had a lot of Jamie's staff from around the whole estate wanting to come work for me because of who I was, my background and what I do. So people were like, can we go and work with Matt at Threadneedle Street? So it became a pretty exclusive place for these guys to come. But we'd get a lot of the young kids come down and, they had no idea of my background. And so they're coming down, giving it a bit of this, giving a bit of that. You know, you don't know me, you don't know where I'm from. I was like, well, actually,
spitting some grime bars at you.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and you know, weirdly enough, I do know where they came from.
Yeah,
because I've been there, and I understand it, and I can empathise with it, and I am the product of hard work and luck.
Yeah,
you know, and they can do it, and you know, I count a lot of those a lot of those students today very, very good friends, and I'm really lucky. I'm really lucky to have those people in my life. But you know, the true trajectory of that was when I was working at Jamie's. You know, we were doing his 15-minute meal book launch at my restaurant, and it was such a stressful night. It was the glitterati of chefs were coming. He had like, you know, so many sort of superstars and directors and everything coming, and I had to do like the food, and I was absolutely bricking it, and it was terrifying. And he had one of these guys that was a friend of Jules, his wife, was coming down to do the DJing, and was an American guy, and I never forget. I was setting up we used to do these huge meat platter displays of different types of Italian charcuterie, and I was doing up this display, and the American guy came over and he just started chatting to me about the food and going, "Wow, that's really amazing. It seems like you really know what you're doing." And I didn't know this guy. The guy didn't know me. We started having a chat, and you know, one thing sort of led to another. It was DJ Barbecue, and that's where, you know, I helped him start up his business, DJ Barbecue, which is like absolutely huge. Soon after that, got a channel with Jamie Oliver and his food.
And don't you have a this is cool? Don't you have a signature hangi?
Yeah,
product from them.
I do.
Do they sell that in New Zealand? No.
No. So again, another very strange story. I was at a festival in the middle of a field, and you know, a little bit pissed up, a little bit drunk, having a chat to some guy. He told me, he's like, I fabricate barbecues. I was like, yeah, whatever. He had a couple on display, and I was like,
everyone in this field fabricates barbecues, mate. Dunk, 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 dunk.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just like, wow, that's, you know, really amazing. And I had a really good think about how to build a barbecue based on a Maori hangi. So having a fire at the bottom, putting volcanic river stones, and then basically trays where you could put all the food in over the top. So I explained it to him. He
right. No one had done it. Yeah.
And then, went and did it. And, you know, when it was completed was the first week of lockdown in the UK, and he illegally drove it up to my house and dropped it off at my doorstep and said, there you go, do your worst.
Are you happy with the food that comes out of it?
It's incredible, bro.
It's
incredible.
Because, you know, I was even thinking, like, I mean, I know that obviously in the traditional setting there's a ritual to dig in the hole, which I'm not knocking for a second, but you know, for the urban hangi practitioner, like, it's a hassle digging a hole. So that's a great idea.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that was the thing. I wanted to have that flavour of hangi, but I wanted it to be easy, and I wanted it to be also commercially viable, because it was, how can I bring my culture? How can I bring who I am?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And the food that I know to London, because there's nothing like it. There's no one doing hangi in London.
And how do you get the? I mean, I guess I was going to say, really, hangi is all about steam, isn't it, rather than wood flavour or whatever. So the question I was going to ask is redundant. I was thinking like flavoured wood chips and whatever, but it's about slow steam cooking, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
So basically, I haven't been able to get volcanic river stones yet. Funnily enough, they're really difficult to import from New Zealand.
I was going to say, I'll mail you some, but everything's done by weight here. It'll be like.
I know, it'd be like £9,000 to send me a couple of rocks.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's actually quite funny. I've been working with a couple of reporters from Māori TV about potentially doing and shooting some content. When I come back, we're going to get those stones blessed, and then I'm going to bring them back to London for a special sort of one-off dinner. And, so they've been sort of helping me out a little bit with it and helping me sort of bring this idea to fruition. You know, I know most of the Maoris in London, Ngāti Ranana, which is the tribe of London. which is a sort of performance group. I know all of those guys. They're really cool, and they've done a lot. As I said, working with Miles, Chris, and Laura at Caravan. Caravan is a New Zealand concept. The concept was based on Cafe La Fare.
A lot of traditional cuisine, like I make this really nice comfort food South American dish. I can't remember. It might be Chilean. It's basically just like a bunch of different meats in a broth with like corn cob and vegetables. I love that kind of food. So what I'm getting to is, by the way, looking at your food, you and I have just in general got quite similar taste in Kai.
Yep.
I was sitting there drooling this morning at 7 a.m. when I was doing my last bit of swap. But anyway, what I'm coming around to is the boil up. It's been funny seeing people put like a restaurant version of those on menus. Have you tried to sort of like flesh up the boil up?
Yeah, well, funnily enough, just last week I was doing a demo at Black Deer Festival, a food demo, in front of a couple of thousand people, and I did a boil-up. Yeah. So basically the guys that fabricated my smoker, they were there, and they were there with my smoker. So I got them to smoke pork overnight, and then I took a load of pork bones and I boiled them up in a really delicious chicken stock. Yeah. And then I got some of my homemade apple cider vinegar and I seasoned it with that. Yeah. A little bit of soy sauce, and I sort of made it like a ramen without the noodles. But then I also smoked some pumpkin and I smoked some kumara. Nice. And got a load of cabbage and just brought that in there, and then it had to be served with the worst type of bread. It's got to be white bread. Yeah. And I mean that it's crap. It's got to be that
jumbo. The stuff. I know the one you mean. Like, what do they used to call it? Jumbo something. And it's just like it's almost like it's almost like a paste. As soon as it goes into your mouth, it's just like, has this even had grains near it? Yeah.
And I was teaching my son how to butter it. Yeah. And he said, I need to melt the butter, and I said, stop. You don't melt the butter. It's thick chunks. Yeah. And he's like, what are you doing, Dad? And I was like, believe me, this is going to work.
You just reminded me.
I was explaining.
Yeah. No, go on. No, now we're both, wait. We're interrupting each other. This is exciting. Bad food. You just reminded me of the chunks of butter with that bread, with fish and chip shop chips and tomato sauce, the classic New Zealand chip buddy. I get hands up from one of the top chef for people who can't see. He's in heaven.
I tell you what, that is just like, it's quite funny because when I did come home last time, I probably put on quite a bit of chunk, and I got back and my wife was like, wow. And I was like, well, Mum was dying. There was a fish and chip shop really close. Yeah. Strathmore Bakery.
Oh my God. So
donuts were amazing.
Yeah. New Zealand, like, I mean, New Zealand pies when they're done well. It's just because it's what we know, right? So it's what we remember. It is. And it's also like when you only got a few dollars in your pocket. Like, for example, when I was doing that Bricky show and I was living in Cuba Street, and there was that Friendly bakery over the road, and they actually did really good pies. So what are you going to do for $2 or whatever? If I have a pie, it's just getting older, right? If I have a pie like that in the morning now, it'd probably take me about 2-3 hours to recover from that. Like, I'd feel that sitting in my body for like, Anyway, that's great to hear that the cultural element coming in. And the other thing I was going to ask around that, just in more general terms, not to do with Māori Kai, but food in general. The other thing that it's definitely happened in New Zealand, so I assume it's happened in London as well, is, well, when I was there, actually, New Zealand, at least brunch culture and stuff was further ahead of London. So has it just become easier to kind of get ingredients and kind of more, I don't know. I'm guessing it was more always there in London. It probably just was in pockets of different ethnic communities. What am I saying here? Food culture there has matured like it has in New Zealand, right? For the general public. Yeah.
I definitely think chefs like Jamie Oliver and people that have watched TV chefs, that the option to buy different cuisines and different foods now is so much more easier than what it was 20 years ago. You know, like going over to friends' houses now, they're like, oh, I've made a traditional Thai chicken curry. And like, we were doing that years ago, 20, 30 years ago. But even now, like, I'll be like, wow, that's really impressive. But I've eaten 50 million of these and I can't stand the taste of it anymore. Impress me with an English pie or like a fry up or something, or baked beans on toast.
We've been going 90 minutes. Do you want to keep going for a little bit longer?
Mate, we can go for as long as you want, brother. Okay,
we're going in and out. I've got one of the busiest chefs in London. You got time? What are you doing today? You got a day off? Oh, no, it's
No,
nighttime. It's
a night now.
nighttime. The day's ended, right?
Yeah, I'm back tomorrow. So
Yeah.
you know, currently what I'm doing is I do menu development now. So I suppose after Mum sort of passed away, I sort of re-looked at my life and what I love about cooking and what I love about chefing and what I really hate about it, and you know what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do. And the things that I love the most is cooking, and I missed it the most. And as you get higher and higher up the ranks, you cook less and less because it's all about people management, firefighting, and you know.
Well, it's also
Going through the
about
day-to-day.
stock management, and it's just management in general, right? It's actually running the
Yeah.
thing. Before you go on, a part of that must be a relief in what I talked about for the chef that doesn't progress, like just permanently being on those concrete floors and hunched over and stuff. Like you kind of have to move on for your own health, right? Because it is pressing on your body after a while doing that work, right?
Yeah, I pivoted from what I'm doing, and I've started sort of another journey of this, I don't know, sort of weird sort of pivot in my life, and it's I took what I loved, and what I love is cooking and creating and coming up with new dishes that are innovative and that are delicious and that, you know, people haven't seen and that are unique, and giving restaurants that I work with the edge over other restaurants, and people going to go, oh my God, this is totally amazing. So, you know, I now work with about 6 restaurant groups, creating food for them. So, you know, it's really an honor for me to be able to sit back and go, wow, there's like up to about 15 restaurants in London that have got my food on their menus.
So if we put the most that's amazing. We put the most sort of like standard term for that on your airport arrival card. You are a consultant. That's what you're doing, right? Is that the word?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Yeah. A food development consultant.
Yeah. But you're also a content creator.
Yeah. So that's the next part that I've started to do.
Bloody 30,000 Instagram followers. 30,000.
Yeah. Well, there was a couple of things from that, and people asked me like how I got that and how I got that rise, and it was, you know, a lot of it was when I was working for Jamie. I remember my biggest one was when I was working for Jamie. You would get these phone calls all the time from his crew to say, like, there's some really important people coming in. We can't really tell you, but can you sit them upstairs away from the public eye and da-da-da-da. And so I was okay. So the one time when I was coming in, I never forget, you know, the operations team, they called me and they were like, you're going to love this one. This is, like, incredible. And I was like, okay, so who is it? And they said, well, we can't tell you, but, like, when they're, like, 5 minutes away about from coming in, we can tell you. And it was Matt LeBlanc and Ken Block.
Wow.
And that was just unreal. So going to sit next to Matt LeBlanc, and he was like, well, I'm Italian and I'm in an Italian restaurant, so tell me what I should eat, you know? And it was, do you know what? It was hilarious. He bought, like, there was this whole entourage, whole of Ken Block's like film crew, mechanics, and things like this. There's about a table of about 11 of them. And I'm sitting there and I'm talking through Matt LeBlanc with all the different dishes. And there was a duck ragu that he really wanted to try. And he was like, oh, we'll get the duck ragu. And it was hilarious. Ken Block goes, oh, why don't we just get a load of stuff, put it in the middle and share? And he just stopped and looked at the whole table and just said, Joey doesn't share. And honestly, it was just the perfect timing. He's an actor. I get it. It's a Friends thing, you know. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. Anyway, the next day was Comic-Con, and I took my son down there, and we were walking around the expo floor, and then I felt my phone in my pocket buzzing, and I was just like, what the fuck? And I was just like, I opened it, and it was like, you've got 1,000 followers, you've got 2,000 followers, 10,000 followers. So I was like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
And then I managed, because you can't see who tagged you or who posted you, because it was 20,000 notifications ago, you know? And I'm like going, what the hell's going on? But a friend of mine, he screenshot it and sent it to me. And it was basically Ken Block had said that he had one of the best meals of his life.
Wow, great, man.
And he had taken a photo of me and he had posted it. So I had all his followers, and then because he also thanked Jamie then took that same photo and posted it on his. So it just went absolute madness. And then quite a few times Jamie had reposted a couple of my food pictures. But then, like, as you go, like, as you know, I know as you get older, especially in London, all the people that I used to work with when I was younger are all now executive chefs,
Yeah, it makes
head
sense.
chefs,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
business owners and stuff. So we're all like at this sort of stage now where we're all kind of
You're
like
all, you're
the
dons.
same,
You're all dons, mate.
yeah. That's what I have to say. We're all dons.
And you said the trajectory from the, you know, kind of what I'm sort of hearing here is the next chapter of your career up till now. You mentioned the trajectory started with Jamie Oliver, and is what you just described what you meant, getting the followers and stuff. Like, is that, because much earlier on you said from Jamie Oliver onwards is when the kind of this phase of my career really started?
Yeah, it just working with DJ Barbecue and doing the festival circuit he's probably not so much a common household name in New Zealand, but
Yeah, I kind of looked at you blankly, but I'm looking now. Yeah.
So he used to be the breakfast host on Kerrang for 10 years. He did a BAFTA award-winning show about skateboarding and snowboarding, and did these incredible. He had a whole production crew. He travelled around all the sort of best surfing, snowboarding places in the world. Went out to New Zealand, did all this. So he became quite big from this TV / radio career, and then decided to go off and be this amazing barbecuist. So his dad and his grandmother and everyone really inspired him to barbecue. So I learned about American barbecue and how to define my style. And I there's barbecues out there that does Argentinian food, there's Filipino, there's Japanese, there's Thai. There's no one being represented from New Zealand. I am sort of that's where I'm sort of holding it, and the kind of style of barbecue and food and content that I do and that I'm proud to do is heroing New Zealand music, and Instagram is where most of my followers and where I do most of my content.
And you're doing other public stuff, and I noticed not non-traditional cooking stuff. I noticed you were doing an evening. I'll just quote unquote an evening with Matt Burgess, and I presume it's you kind of talking about your background, and also serving people food. Where did I see that? There was a
so there is an iconic department store over here called Fortnum and Mason. Which is, if I can explain, Fortnum and Mason would be probably in the top 3 department stores in the world. So in terms of poshness, you've got Harrods at the very top. And then you'll have something like Selfridges would be, or Harvey Nichols would be the other one, and then there'll be Fortnum and Mason. It's very sort of high premium foods that they basically do there, and high premium clothes and high premium sort of homewares, basically. And they have a flagship store in Piccadilly Circus, and on their 4th floor at the start of this year, they built a food hall, basically. Within this food hall, there is a supper club space to come and cook. So they have asked me and many other very celebrated chefs to come and do an evening with. So on the 14th of July, I've been honoured to come down and talk about the story about what I've been talking to you about, but it's sort of in the settings of food, what I've done when Mum passed away. I didn't get very much from her, but I found hundreds of recipes where I have adapted them into modern food and modern dining of what I did, and sort of attached them to stories of that I've had growing up, right from, staying with the Samoan family in Newtown to my mum serving me mince on toast when we had no money, and, going to the wonderful Chinese takeaway, and I can't remember the name of it, in Kilburnie, and getting chicken wontons.
Tongs takeaway.
tongs, and it's all of these that are linked. Thank you for giving me that name. I've got to remember.
Why do I remember shit like that? It's crazy. I just surprised myself. Like, and I just thought now, aside from when your mum was skint, like she owned a deli, and so most of us Antipodean folk will joke about how terrible our grandmother or our mother's cooking was, but I'd imagine your mum's recipes were pretty good for that generation, because even to think about shopping at a deli, let alone owning one, you'd have to have a bit of culinary nous, right?
Well, I come from a long line of cooks and not chefs, home cooks.
Yeah.
My grandfather was a grocery store owner, so I think that's what inspired my mum to do the delicatessen, because she grew up with that. My mum was always a very good savoury cook. My nana was an incredible pastry cook.
Yeah.
And I found hundreds of her recipes and her mother's recipes as well, like dating back to 1850, which I've got, one of the dishes that on my supper club called a parkin, basically, which is a traditional English dessert, which I'm going to be sort of doing in a very modernised way as well. So, yeah, it was mad sort of trying to understand these recipes and going back through many years of my family history. Yeah.
And so flitting between the professional and the personal, because I started listening to another podcast. I only listened to literally a couple of minutes and then ran out of time. So I know you've been quite public about a bunch of stuff. That's why I've been happy to ask you a bunch of questions today, because you didn't just find recipes from your mum, right? You somehow, after she passed, got a connection to your dad for the first time?
Yeah, it's a pretty crazy story, bro. When I first got home, and when I was in isolation in Christchurch, was at the Sedema Hotel. My wife works for a hospice charity here in the UK, and we had already found out that mum was dying, that she had very limited time before she would pass away. So, it was like, what do you do in that situation? She had no will, she had no money. We just sort of had to work it out. So some of the things that you get told to do is that, you go through all the belongings, you go through everything, put them into piles, of what. So it might be like a pile that you're going to take up to mum, so she's got all of her personal effects around her. You've got maybe some jewellery that you might give to family.
Another one for the op shop, another one for the rubbish.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
One for the cousin and everything like this. Anyway, I had done all this, and I'd gone through everything, and it had been like maybe 3 or 4 days. And I don't know if you remember, and some of your listeners probably will remember this, in the old state homes, you always had a flour bin and a sugar bin. And that's where, like, you'd get your sack of flour and you'd pour it into your flour bin, and from there you would scoop out your flour to make your scones or whatever Afghans or whatever mum or dad or your grandma was making for the day. So my mum had these in her kitchen, and they were sort of the last things to get out. So I was like lifting it up, and I poured out the mum's sugar bin, and I noticed, I was just about to wrap up the rubbish bag, and I noticed there was a corner of an envelope sticking out of it. And so I just pulled it out randomly to have a look at. And because I'd been spending the last 3 or 4 days of going through all of mum's personal effects, I kind of started to understand whose handwriting is what. So there was like my grandmother's handwriting, there was my grandfather's handwriting, my mother's handwriting, plus cousins, aunties, stuff, which I got to know really well. This handwriting I hadn't seen, but the weirdest thing on this handwriting is that there were capitals in the wrong place. Now that's how I write.
Oh, no way. Come on.
I'm New Zealand educated.
Yeah.
God bless the New Zealand education system. I was never diagnosed with dyslexia or ADHD, but I managed to wing my way through school system.
Yeah.
So it was bizarre. So I opened the envelope, and inside was a picture that had been torn in half.
Yeah.
There was a letter, and then there was a small Post-it note, basically. And the letter, the picture was somebody who looked like me. Now, the weird thing is that earlier on, through all of Mum's photos, I found a picture that had been cut in half, and I put the two pictures together, and it was Mum and what presumed was my father. Now, I'm nearly 50 years old and never heard nor seen nor understand who this person was, or the only thing that I had was a name. So it was sort of a really bizarre time, and I found this and I got really overwhelmed. I nearly fainted. I had to sit down and called my wife in the UK, and she was just like, look, this is not the time to be sort of like trying to do this.
Can I ask a quick question, Matt?
Yeah.
Because what was the story? I mean, not with what you're telling me. What was the story you'd been told for the 48 years or whatever leading up to that? I think that's important.
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
The actual story that I've been told is that he didn't want to have anything to do with you, so he took off.
Yeah.
You don't even want to meet him. He's an asshole.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
Yeah.
Throughout all my years of growing up, I spoke to my uncle, who became really, really close to
his brother. His brother?
My mother.
Oh, your mother's brother. Yeah.
So I knew nothing about his family or anything like this. I'm just like, I said to my uncle, like, did you ever meet him? She's like, no, I heard of him. And I was like, so what it is? And I think in a roundabout way, they didn't really want to say, it's like, your mum was only with him for a couple of days, like, or anything like that. Like, I think because of the circumstance of how I came about, I don't think was very honourable.
They hooked up and she happened to get pregnant. Is that a fair? That's yeah.
I think personally that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
However, all my family and friends and everybody that knew my mum and knew me and how I came about would never say that.
No, for all the reasons we've talked about. We talked about a lot of that earlier on. There's the biracial thing in New Zealand. There's the not being married if you're from a religious background. There's the even being a solo mother. I totally get it. Yeah.
And it was just a really sort of bizarre thing to find.
Absolutely.
So anyway, I didn't worry about it because I had bigger things to sort of to think about at the time. But what was the day of Mum's passing was, which I didn't know that she was going to pass that day, was a pretty tough day. Mum was, Mum was like being managed with her pain on really, really strong drugs.
Yeah.
So she was pretty much in a coma.
Yeah.
But she wasn't in a good way, and I had been sitting by her side for a few hours, and it was a real tough morning. And brilliantly, the matron or the head nurse of the hospice that I was at, she came to me and she's like, look, do you want to come have some food in the cafe and have a cup of tea and let me make you something. And it was just I have to say as well, like, just that one, that's all I remember from that day. Just that one small little, can we help you? It really resounded with me. But anyway, I was in the cafe and weirdly, I was just scrolling through Facebook just mindlessly as you do, and it came up with suggested groups. And one group that got suggested to me was Find Your Family in New Zealand.
Bro, how do you have all these universe moments in your life? You have these, honestly, you've told a few of them.
Honestly.
Yeah.
I wasn't even thinking.
Yeah.
I wasn't even like, I was like, oh, let me post this picture of it and see if anybody's seen him. Like, my whole life, I've tried to find this guy. My whole life, I've gone to Salvation Army. I've talked to potential private detectives, or if they could do something. I wanted to know where I was from.
Did you have a name all that time?
Yeah, his name is Joe.
Oh, okay, I'm not asking. But you. Yeah. I'm not saying tell me his name. I'm saying, did you have a full name to go to the Salvation Army with or anything?
Not his full name.
Oh my God!
What the Salvation Army.
Joe, fucking, you have to be a pretty good private detective to come. Yeah.
Yeah. What the private detectives and the Salvation Army was saying that even if we did find him, you don't have his birth certificate. Your name is not on. Well, his name is not on your birth certificate, so we can't approach anybody. So, I just left it. I didn't even worry. Anyway, I posted it in this group, This was about, I don't know, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I thought, look, I'll go home, I'll get some rest, and then I'll come back up and see Mum before they put her down to sleep, which was generally at about 6 o'clock. And as I was going home, my phone just started like absolutely going crazy with messages, with people sharing the post, people commenting on it, people asking me questions about where this person could live from. Did I have any information? Did I have anything? So it was around about 7 o'clock that night, and I was at home, and I had a message come through from somebody to say, I think my grandfather is your dad. And I'm just like, okay, cool. So what, how would you do that? And they told me about a birthmark that he's got, where I didn't know about this birthmark, first and foremost. I didn't know that this exists on his body. So they were explaining this to me. I was like, no. And they were like, oh, okay, well, maybe there's one other thing that you might know, that my uncle, his brother, is called Walton. Now, little did anybody know that the person that he was traveling with, in the letter, it says that, hi, I'm with my brother Walton. We're heading to Australia. I'll be back to New Zealand soon. It's pretty much what the letter said in a nutshell. So I'm like, oh, my God, this is like really freaky. She's like, look, I'm with him now. He wants to talk to you.
Wow. Okay, so that could go two ways. Wow. Yeah.
So by then, I'm just freaking out. So I said, can you give me 5 minutes and then give me a call back? So then I called my wife in London. It was probably at about 6 o'clock in the morning. She had some pretty rough mornings with me waking up and that. And I was like, look, I think I found him. I need you to be on FaceTime as I take this phone call. And she's like, okay, let's do it. You sure you want to do this? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. The phone went and I picked it up, was like, hello. And they were like, hi, this is the hospice. Your mum's just passed away.
God, bro. Fucking hell, dude.
And that's God honest truth.
Yeah.
Moment that my mum passed away, I met my dad.
Fucking hell. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, and the way you're telling this story, I'm hoping that it sounds like it's going to turn out that the next part of the story went pretty well.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be totally honest. I still haven't spoken to him.
Oh, you didn't speak to him that night?
No, I didn't. But I've done a few other things, and we found out, through other sort of ways, which is, again, just a whole bizarre story, but I'll try and make it as quick as I possibly can.
So, but just quickly, this is the sort of like, what's the word, kind of slightly autistic stuff I need to know. Not that I think I have autism, but sorry people. But for some reason I need to know that if it's like trying to work out while we're talking and I'm listening. So if his granddaughter rung you, that's your half niece. So you've got a half brother as well. Or sister.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And this is where
continue.
Is where it all came from.
Yeah.
I found out through her that I have 5 brothers and sisters.
Wow.
And each one of them have 4 children.
Yeah.
So I had a massive family, and some of them I am the youngest of the 5 brothers. So
that's a lot, man. That's really overwhelming, bro. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
They were all born a lot before me. So what I can gather is that he had a wife and family where he's from. Then he came to Wellington with his brother, met my mum, and then flew to Australia. And that was kind of like the last sort of contact that my mum had with him. So that was a bit overwhelming. So I started talking to these girls, and they were incredible. They have been incredible. Massively helpful throughout this whole journey. Soon after I got back to the UK, I had another lady contact me from Australia, which is just bizarre. And she's like, oh, I think that my daughter's your sister. And
hang on.
Yeah.
I think that my daughter is your sister.
Yeah.
So that's his ex before your mum.
After my mum.
Yep. Go on, continue.
So basically, when he went to Australia, he met this other lady.
Yeah.
They had a child, and same thing. He took off and came back to New Zealand or went off to wherever as well. Now, by this time, I'm very skeptical because there's been so many phone calls and so many things. Mum's passed away. There's a lot of emotion going on. I'm trying to get back to the UK. I've been away from home for 2 months. I've been away from work for 2 months.
I hear you, brother. I hear you. It's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot. You know, when they say a lot, I'm thinking that expression. I go, that is actually a lot. It's a lot.
It was all too much.
Yeah,
I basically said to this woman, like, I'm not doing anything. Now, I had done a couple of DNA things. I'd done one for my heritage and one for Ancestry DNA. And I just said, look, if you think that she's my sister, do a DNA test, you know. And she's like, yeah, okay, then cool. And well, I said, I don't really want to talk to you until, you know, the DNA test comes back. Anyway, she kept in contact every now and then, like once a week she'd send me a message. She hadn't spoken to her daughter, told her about me because she wanted to wait till the DNA test come back. So what happened was really, really strange, that on my heritage, I linked with a young girl who was about 12 years old. And it was like bizarre. And I looked at this girl and she had the same last name as the lady that had been contacting me. And so I screenshot the picture and I sent it to her and I was like, do you know this person? She goes, yeah, that's my granddaughter. That's like your niece. And I'm like, well, but we've connected. And she's like, I told you my daughter is your sister. And then, literally a couple of weeks after that, we connected instantly.
Who did the sister? This your sister?
Yeah. My sister, yeah. So now it turns out that I have 6 brothers and sisters.
5 of them from the first marriage and 1 of them from after. God, yeah. I know you got a sense of humour. He liked to get around, didn't he?
he was a player, man. Yeah.
Well.
Player.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, crazy.
He did. So, you know.
So he's still like, so just, I don't know why I need to know this, just interesting. Like, so where's he based now? Australia or New Zealand?
He's in New Zealand.
Yeah.
I don't want to be specific.
No, I don't need to know.
Where he is. But yeah, he's
must
alive and well in New Zealand.
So he was married, he had a bunch of kids, must have been with her for a while to have 4 kids.
Yep.
And then he sort of saw you. It's crazy. He's like we say, like we've both agreed to, he met your mum in the pub or whatever, like had a fling in Wellington and then off to Australia and another family there. Crazy, eh?
Yep. Yeah. So I think by choice, my brothers don't want to get in contact, which is, I'm not gonna say that didn't hurt a little bit, but I understand.
Yeah, but you put the same boundary in with your father for now, and you know, like, because I lost my grandmother a couple of years ago, and my mum was in pretty much a similar situation you talked about at the hospice and stuff, and you know, I know what she's still going through with that. So you know, you've still got time. Even though you're working and you're busy and you got your wife and stuff, you still got time to, you know, it's a cliche word. You still got time to go processing that before you meet Dad. That's the way I hear it. Does that sound fair?
And that's exactly what I've been doing.
Yeah.
It's just processing that. But like, I speak to my sister.
That's good. That's good. It's having support. Yeah.
That's amazing. And you know, from never having any brothers or sisters in my life to actually be able to call somebody my sister and know that it's my sister.
I hear that. Like later in life, I've got a really small family too. And my uncles and aunties and my mum are probably at the worst point in their relationship. So no, I've got no brothers and sisters. So I get that if like a half sister came out of the woodwork, that's probably quite helpful and quite comforting, because it sounds like me, you've grown up with just a handful of family around you, you know. So it's good to hear, man. Yeah. And you're happily married, and you got a bloody, from what I could work out, you got a bloody 21-year-old son now. Must be 21, 22?
Yeah, 22.
Yeah.
I've got a 33-year-old daughter with 3 grandchildren as well in New Zealand from a very, very previous relationship. But we haven't touched on that. But
no, that's crazy. I got a 33-year-old daughter. I'll start thinking about that. Bro, we've hit 2 hours. It's been all over the place. It's great, man. Like I remember, it's funny. So I reckon we probably knew each other about a total of 6 months in person. But I remember you well. Remember you calling in on the show. As I say, I remember coming to, must have been in the eastern suburbs now I think about it. So your mum must have had, God, that's so my hood. That's crazy. It must have been just that few years difference growing up. But from what you said, I'm guessing we'll finish on up in a sec, but I'm guessing that your mum was up in the hills behind the bakery if she had a state house in Strathmore. Is that where she was? Or
she was in the Quadrant. So basically, the Quadrant was just off Broadway, but Broadway cut. Split up Miramar and Strathmore.
Because I kept coming back to that area because before Nana passed, like she was on. Oh, now I've just suddenly slipped my mind, but she's literally on that side street that Strathmore Bakery's on. So I'd be back there like nearly every year. So, hey, bro, it's been awesome. Yeah, like I am traveling more now. Now I've got a grown-up job over the last decade. Like travel's part of my work. It wasn't over COVID. It's just opened up again. So I'm in Barcelona in 2 months, which isn't. It's closer to you than I have been, but what I'm saying is, I imagine I'll make it back to England one day. You know, if only to go to Glastonbury. Yeah, we'll look you up.
Mate, like if you go to Glastonbury, man, you get me tickets. Let's go together.
Yeah, all right.
You know, you've got a house here. You've got a room.
Oh, cool, bro.
Family. You've got a honey. Please come. It's a Kiwi style, so whatever you need, bro.
Yeah, stay in touch on the DMs, man. Let's keep in contact more after this, okay?
Thank you so much, Lewis.
Take care.
Amazing to talk to you, bro, honestly.
Okay, see you, buddy. Bye-bye.
Cool, bro. Take care, man.